Chapter 4 of the Boy Scouts' First Campfire. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Boy Scouts' First Campfire by Herbert Carter. When the fire was kindled. "How are you feeling now, Bumpus?" asked Tad, some time later, as he once more stopped to allow all the stragglers pull up. For some of the boys were beginning to look rather fagged, though they tried to hide the telltale signs, being too proud to own up to any weakness that ill became a scout. "Pretty ragged, to tell the truth," replied the fat boy, who was puffing as he came along. "It ain't the poison I've absorbed in my system so much as a weakness that makes me shiver all over. And, Tad, I've walked this far before, and never felt like this either." "Oh, I expected that you would have that sort of a spell," remarked the other. "You see, that tumble, and the shock of feeling something biting you, that was terrible because you were in the dark, must have given your nervous system a bad jolt. But keep up if you can, Bumpus. In a little while now we'll be near the lake, and our first camp." "And just think of it, boys, what a roaring old fire we'll have tonight," spoke up Giraffe, craning his long neck to glance around the circle that had gathered about the leader. "You'll just leave all that to me, Giraffe," said the patrol leader, sternly. "Here we are about to get into our first camp, and begin to take up the duties all scouts ought to learn, so they can take care of themselves, and be of help to others in the woods. And let me tell you, the first campfire is too serious a thing for you to start it offhand. So I positively forbid you to think of using a single match tonight without permission." Giraffe shrank back, looking crushed. He had been building high hopes on having unlimited chances for carrying out his favorite diversion, once away from the restraints of civilization. But he must learn by degrees, possibly through sad experience, that a fire is just as terrible in the wilderness, once it gets beyond control, as in a settled community. It is a good servant, but a very bad master. "How far is the lake from here, would you say, Tad?" asked Davy Jones. "Not over 2 miles," was the reply. "You notice that the country is getting wilder the further we go. Around Lake Omega, they say, it beats everything, for you can't see a single house." "How does it come that this lake, lying so close to Cranford, has never been visited by any of you fellows?" asked Bob White, who, being a comparatively newcomer like Allan and Tad, could not be supposed to know as much about things as the rest of the scouts who had been born in Cranford and brought up there. "Why, you see, for a long time all this country up here was owned by a rich man, who meant to make a game preserve out of it. He even had a high wire fence built around part of the tract, including the lake, and kept gamekeepers here so nobody could get in to steal a single fish. But he died before he ever had a chance to finish the job, and his widow sold the ground to a lumber concern that never cared a thing for game. Chances are there'll be some high old hunting up here this fall, and I'm going to get in on it if I can." It was Davy Jones who gave this information. He had a father who was said to be a very smart lawyer, and Davy bade fair to follow in his footsteps. At least the boy was never asleep when anything was going on, and he could easily subscribe to that scout injunction which requires that a boy keep his eyes and ears open in order to learn things that ordinary person would never see nor hear. Once more they took up the march, Bumpus being a little refreshed from the halt. A couple of the other fellows kept near him from now on, and even linked arms with the fat boy, who was universally well liked on account of his disposition being sunny, no matter whether in fair weather or in storm. Along about 4 in the afternoon a shout arose. "I see water ahead!" yelled Giraffe, who had managed to get in ahead of the others. "Well, with that neck you ought to be able to see anything," called out Bumpus, from further back in the line. "I guess I could see whether a bee went into a hole in a stump or just swung past," retorted the other. "But there's your lake, fellows, and we're right close up on the same. Now, just look through that opening in the trees. See the sun shining on the little waves. Say, don't it look fine, though? Talking about fires, but that'll keep," as he saw the patrol leader turn his eyes quickly upon him. Everyone felt like quickening his pace, even the weary Bumpus. Step-Hen seemed especially solicitous about the welfare of his stout comrade, for he kept hovering near him, offering to lend his arm or do any other kindly act. Bumpus eyed him a little suspiciously, as though he had an idea the other might have some dark motive in being so extra kind. "See here, Step-Hen," he declared once, when the other slipped an arm through his and helped him on his way, "I reckon you're thinking that if you're good to me I'll own up to taking that beastly little compass of yours, eh? Well, just get that notion out of your head, won't you? Because I ain't going to confess to something I never did, and don't you say compass to me again, hear?" "Oh, never mind," said Step-Hen, very sweetly for him, and with a curious smile that made the fat boy uneasy. "Of course, if you say you didn't keep it, there must be some mistake. Only it seems mighty funny how my things are always disappearing, and the rest of you get off scot-free. But don't bother about it, Bumpus. Sure the thing is bound to turn up somewhere. Only I hope I find it before I go and get lost in the forest. I always was afraid of that, you know. I'll try and forget all about the compasses. Here, lean on me a little harder if you want to. I ain't tired a whit, and can stand it." But Bumpus was able to walk alone. Truth to tell, he fancied Step-Hen was trying to frisk him all over, as if endeavoring to locate the position of some object that might feel like the missing compass. "There's the stuff the farmer brought, fellows," said Thad, presently. It had been dumped alongside the road at a certain place marked by the two who had come up here on a spying trip beforehand. Each boy took what he could carry, and in this way the entire equipment was carried down to a campsite on the shore of the splendid body of water known as Lake Omega. "That word Omega means the end, don't it?" said Davy Jones, as they started to put up one of the two tents, and gather the provisions, blankets, cooking utensils, and such things together. "I hope it won't be the end of any of us," chuckled Giraffe, who had been casting furtive looks around as if searching for an ideal spot on which he hoped the first campfire would be built. "Well, every fellow who doesn't know how to swim has got to get busy and learn the first thing," said the patrol leader, looking toward Smithy meaningly. "Oh, I want to know how, Thad, believe me," returned that worthy, earnestly. "My mother doesn't believe any fellow should go near the water until he knows how to swim. But how could he ever learn in that case, I'd like to know?" "Fix himself up in a tree, and strike out," suggested Davy, to whom a tree appealed very frequently as the first way out of any trouble. "Now you're away off there, sir," broke in Bob White, smiling. "He should immediately proceed to get in touch with one of those schools that teach everything through the mails, and take his dives off the dining room table." It was at least satisfying to see how, under the management of the two experienced leaders, Thad and Allan, the tents were soon raised. Then several of the boys were set to work digging around the upper half outside the canvas. "What's all this for, Mr. Scoutmaster?" asked Smithy, as he laid an old newspaper on the ground to kneel on, and began digging away with a hatchet, having actually drawn on a pair of new working gloves made of canvas, in order to keep his hands from getting soiled. "Why, in case of a sudden and heavy rain, we'd be in danger of having a flood rush through the tents if we didn't make this gutter or sluice to throw it off. Notice that it's on the upper side only. And when you're finished here, boys, Allan and myself will make the stone fireplace where we expect to do pretty much all of our cooking. The big campfire is another thing entirely, and we'll let you all have a hand in building that, of logs and brush." So they constructed a long fireplace of stones easily found along the shore of the lake. It looked a little like a letter V, in that one end was wider than the other. And across the smaller end a stone was placed as a support for the coffee pot, which would occupy a position in that quarter, the frying pan needing considerably more room. Taking pattern from this first fireplace, some of the other scouts, ambitious to try their hand at making such a useful adjunct to camp life, fashioned a second one close by, for the patrol was to be divided into two sections when the matter of cooking was concerned. The sun was sinking low behind the hills when the matter of supper was agitated. Giraffe was calling for something to stay the terrible sense of hunger he declared was making him feel weak. This thing of not being able to sneak into the home pantry between meals was already giving him trouble, and evidently Giraffe would have to lay in a greater stock when the regular chance arose, or else go hungry. Finally, however, those who did the cooking on this first night, Thad and Allan they chanced to be, announced that the meal was ready. So, to carry out the idea of being under rules and regulations, the bugler was told to sound the assembly call, though every member of the patrol hovered close by, ready to fall to with the eagerness of half-famished wolves. Then came the job of making ready for their first campfire. That was a matter of such tremendous importance in the eyes of all that every fellow had to share in bringing the fuel, and helping to stack it, according to the directions of Allan. No one worked with greater eagerness than Giraffe. He was fairly wild to see the red flames dancing upward, and the sparks sailing off on the faint night air, as though they carried a message from the camp of the Boy Scouts to some distant port unseen from that lower world. And when finally all was ready, the young scoutmaster, after grouping his followers around the heap, solemnly took a brand from one of the cooking fires, and with a flourish applied it to the inflammable timber. Immediately the crackling flame shot up through the stuff prepared, and in another minute there arose a brilliant pyramid of fire that caused the neighboring trees to stand out like red ghosts. And then arose a shout from 8 lusty young throats, as the Silver Fox Patrol danced around the first campfire of their new organization. That was an event long to be remembered, and to be written down in the annals of the outing with becoming ceremony. End of chapter 4. Recording by Richard Kilmer, Rio Medina, Texas.